Hjertelig velkommen til Inside Israel her fra Internasjonale Kristne Ambassade i Jerusalem og her fra vårt senter i Åsgårdstrand. I denne sendingen så setter vi fokus på det som skjer og har skjedd i krigen mellom Russland og Ukraina, og hvordan ICEJ blant annet er engasjert i dette for å hjelpe jøder på flukt. Med oss i denne sendingen så skal vi få Nicole Yoder, som er leder for det sosiale hjelpearbeidet og Aliyah-programmet i ICEJ. Aliyah, det handler om at jøder vender hjem til Israel. Og vi skal møte David Parsons, som er vår mediasjef i Jerusalem. Og nå går vi rett til Haifa Home faktisk, hvor Nicole Yoder sitter på kontor og skal bli med oss i denne samtalen her. Hi Nicole. Thank you for taking time with us from Haifa Home in Israel.
It's a pleasure, Doug.
For how long time have you been living in Israel and been with the ICEJ?
I have been with the ICEJ in Jerusalem since 1999, although I've been in Israel since 1992. So it's the years are starting to add up.
Please tell us, how is ICEJ ministering to Israel and to the nation through the ICEJ Aid and Aliyah department?
Well, the ICEJ Aid works in four main broad areas. We have our work with Holocaust survivors through our Home for Holocaust Survivors in Haifa. We are also working with Aliyah and integration to help bring Jewish people back to the land. But we don't want to just leave them at the doorstep without being assisted to establish their lives. And so we're working also with integration projects that will help them become firmly established in this country and get a good start. We are also involved with projects that are crisis related. And when we talk about crisis, we're talking about war, natural disaster, even economic disaster. If you think about what happened during the Corona pandemic, was very unprecedented. It may be shelters provided for vulnerable communities on the borders of Israel. So the crisis projects can cover a variety of needs. And then we have a fourth area of aid that we simply call giving a future and a hope. And this comes from Jeremiah, where the Lord says, I know the plans I have for you, plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And the idea of this area of aid is to help Israelis from all different backgrounds to develop themselves, to grow and learn, whether they need vocational training or other kinds of assistance that will help them get to a better future.
In this current crisis in Ukraine, which needs does the refugees come with?
Well, the refugees that are coming now to Israel, most of them weren't planning on making Aliyah right now. They had their lives, they were settled and situated, and even though they might have been thinking about making Aliyah, usually the process of making Aliyah takes some time. It might take a year or two to get yourself organized. It's not just the paperwork and providing the details of the actual immigration process. It's also learning about what kind of job opportunities might be in Israel, learning about the country, starting to, think to yourself, where would I get employed, or how am I going to learn the language? Some people start to learn the language before they come. And there's like this whole process that happens. And what's happening right now, of course, is that people weren't expecting to come. Families are being torn apart because the sons and the husbands and the fathers between ages of 18 and 60 are not allowed to leave the country. So we're seeing women and children fleeing. Most people are coming with nothing or very little. And so, basically you see families torn apart and this, very great uncertainty and concern. How are we going to provide for ourselves? Where are we going to live? And so these are the kinds of issues. They're coming to Israel and they're coming to a hotel or a hostel room. And maybe they have a month or a couple of months that they can stay there while they get themselves situated. But then it's time to, to start figuring out how to work and how to get an apartment. And what's happening now is they've decided that because this is really quite a large operation, clearly, and all the different government ministries are involved, and they're basically expediting the Aliyah process. So it's not going to take quite as long in, like, say, the countries that are surrounding the Ukraine, they're taking the refugees. They're staying there for a time while the Aliyah process is started, but they're expediting that so they can come quickly to Israel, or more quickly to Israel, and then finish it here. But basically, there's already something like 4,000 that have arrived, and they're not they're just renting hotel rooms and hostel rooms. There's not enough absorption centers or space for them in those places. And so all the municipalities are getting involved. Different municipalities are taking different numbers of residents. I know this because I'm starting to get requests from the different places. Can you help us with furniture for apartments? Can you help us with basic household items that will help these people get started? We've had requests for toys for the children because they have nothing. We've had requests for food baskets. So there's a lot of different needs you can imagine. When you land, you don't have the language, you don't have a big savings, and many people are traumatized actually in many ways. So there might even be some emotional things that need to be cared for. And so these are some of the needs that are coming right now.
Is Israel prepared for this wave of refugees?
Well, that's an excellent question. Is Israel prepared? Are you ever prepared for tens of thousands of refugees? I was speaking with some friends at the Jewish Agency, and they were like, wow, we don't have space this is going to have to be like a whole national effort. Everybody's going to have to get involved. And I was teasing her. I said to her in Hebrew, katan alechem, this is a small thing for you. You've been here, you've done this before, you have experience. Looking at the 90s when the Russian Aliyah came, in a decade, suddenly there was an extra 1 million people in the country. And at the same time, the Ethiopian Aliyah came, and there was another 15,000 that came in one weekend. And so we've been through some of these waves before. And I think one of the things that Israel's fantastic about is they're quick on their feet. I mean, obviously, there's going to be all kinds of things happening that, maybe aren't the best, organized as best as you would have wanted or expected, because this wasn't anticipated. But they're also good at turning things around and making a plan. And it'll be a bit of balagan, as we say here. There'll be lots going on and maybe some confusion and whatever, but I feel like there's such a lot of goodwill in the country and a lot of desire to help. And so it'll be okay, as we say here, yeh beseder, it will be okay in the end somehow.
What is ICEJ doing in the midst of this crisis?
So that is one thing that is definitely very needed. All friends on deck, as we say, all hands on deck, all friends on deck. So there is a great need for everyone to be involved, whether it's, the regular citizens or organizations or Christian friends or whoever can help. And so when I'm getting these requests, we're looking to see, okay, what can we do? So we started putting together welcome packages for families that are coming, and that they're going to need these basic items, whether it's sheets and duvet covers and blankets and just toiletries and towels, things that are like a welcome thing that they can get started with, toys and things for children. And like I said, food packages. We're helping with funding some of the flights and the stays in the hotels and the process of getting them to the land, because this is really critical. There's so many coming at one time that there's really a need to assist with all of this. And then, of course, once they're landing here in the country, we've already had some of our team involved with volunteering to translate, doing kids activities and translating, or, just the municipalities are suddenly they need to take care and provide programs and assistance for the families, but then you have language issues. Well, some of our own staff speak the languages that are required, and so we've had them out there volunteering. our home for Holocaust survivors. This project is preparing rooms for some of the survivors that we're helping to fund. We have partners that are going in literally into the various cities and towns that have been under attack in the Ukraine. And we're helping provide for them to actually be rescued directly from their homes. And so this is amazing. And we want to be able to provide some rooms potentially, if there were those who want to come to this particular place, to have them a place for them here. Of course, we can't take all the ones who are coming because we don't have that much space, but looking for places for them to be. Yeah, I noticed when speaking with people who are on the front lines processing the actual applicants, they were noting that the first ones who came through were coming through kind of when things had just started, and so there wasn't as much trauma. And they're seeing now, as people are coming now just across the border, they've experienced a lot more, they've seen a lot more. And so this is going to be an area, I think, of real need. We were visiting, for instance, just the other day, taking packages for young people that were going to be in a youth village. And speaking with the director, he says, they're arriving today, and this like never happens. We're getting 24, 14 to 16-year-olds. They're coming without parents. They're coming without any family members. We know nothing about them, just nothing. We don't even have their passport details. We don't know their medical situation. We don't know anything. And yet here we are, we're preparing a space for them. And so ICEJ is trying to support, these kinds of things by providing the just essential things that are needed. But we're also doing it on the other end. So if we're helping pull people out, we're also, our Finnish branch has sent a truck of goods in that are providing clothing and sleeping bags and baby items and all kinds of things that are needed as people are coming across the border, and they need these items. And soon a second truck will be going in. So that's another thing that this coming week. And so there's just a whole variety of things happening. And you don't always know what's going to be, the next need that comes to you. And you just, hop in there and do what you can. So everything from flights and buses and place to stay to welcoming packages and volunteering and just a whole range of things here on the ground as well.
So we are actually involved in all the different stages for the refugees.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Right from some people, working to actually go in to take the survivors out, for instance, in that case, to the process of not just survivors, but also other people coming and landing in hotels and needing help with the flights and the whole transportation of buses and whatnot to bring them to Israel. And then once they land in Israel, looking for the different areas, okay, who's needing help with just basic items and how can we help provide them? And, we wouldn't be able to do any of this if it wasn't for all of our friends around the world. I'm just constantly so blessed. I'm the one who gets the requests on this end, right? And I'm always thinking, okay, Lord, how are you going to provide for this need? And I just see how he touches the hearts of our friends around the world so many times. And I'm asking, okay, how are we going to do this? And then I get a notification. Some funds came in, you can take care of this need now. And so I'm just so blessed and so grateful for each one of you that the Lord has moved on your heart to give. And I want to say a huge thank you. We couldn't do it without you.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, for taking time with us. All blessings to you. David Parsons vår mediasjef I Jerusalem. Han har 2 tiår bak seg I landet og utdannet jurist, og har stor innsikt både I Guds ord, men også I det israelske samfunnet. Vi tar en prat med han nå om dette med Aliyah, som altså handler om at jøder vender tilbake til Israel. Hi David, thank you for joining us in this program.
Yes, shalom from Jerusalem, Dag.
What is the biblical perspective of Jews immigrating to Israel today?
Well, the prophet said, "Hear, O nations, he who scattered Israel will gather him and keep him like a shepherd does his flock. that it was God who scattered the Jewish people, exiled them for a corrective reason, but in his everlasting love and mercy, he promised to bring them back. And we've seen this in recent decades, over the past 100, 120, 40 years, an incredible, against the tide of history, a return of the Jews, even amid pogroms and Holocaust and whatever. Somehow they've managed to come back. And we just view it as the hand of God, the promise of God, not only keeping what was said by the Hebrew prophets, but all the way back to the promise to Abraham that he would give the land of Israel as an everlasting possession to the Jewish people, and they've come back to possess it according to his covenant promises.
What is the history of Jews returning to the land of Israel in the latest centuries?
Yes, there have been an estimated 3.5 million, maybe close to 4 million Jews who've returned to the land of Israel over the last 140 years, since the early 1880s. They've come from over 100 countries around the world. It's quite amazing how they've come together to speak one language and restore so many things about their nation. But it starts in the early 1880s, the modern day return with many Jews, some walking, others by boat from Odessa, some of these areas that are being attacked now in Ukraine, what was at some points considered part of southern Russia, and also from Yemen, people walking or walking to catch a ship. And Isaiah talks about how the ships of Tarshish, chapter 60, the ships of Tarshish, ocean-going vessels, shall come first. And then who are these who fly like a dove to their nest? And we had around 60, 70 years. The main means of Jews coming back was by ship. And then the last 50, 60, 70 years, it's been by airplane. And the large waves have been, after the Holocaust, the survivors who were in displacement camps, 800,000 Jews from Arab countries, Middle Eastern countries, who were expelled after Israel was born as a nation. A million or more Soviet Jews once communism collapsed. And we're seeing another wave. I believe it will be a wave when you think around maybe 20,000 people in 2 to 3 months. That's a lot of people to take in for any country this size.
How has the ICEJ been involved in the wave of Jews returning to Israel in our time?
The Christian Embassy has been involved in bringing Jews back to the land in the great gathering in our day. Ever since our founding in 1980. In fact, we have some people who were involved in the founding of the embassy who had been helping some of the Soviet refuseniks, some of the Soviet emigres in the 1970s. There were, 15, 20,000 coming out through Budapest and Vienna at that time, and where Christians were already helping them. But of course, the big surge was in the early 90s when more than 1 million Russian-speaking Jews came from the former Soviet Union. We've helped with Jews from Ethiopia. I think it's in the thousands now, from India, from all over Europe, from Sweden, France, many countries from North and South America. And we've assisted over 165,000 Jews in making Aliyah from around 40, 45 countries. So it's quite an amazing record. Some of them, you really can't talk about it openly, like when we're helping with Persian Jews coming back from Iran, even Cuban Jews, some of these closed countries, we're even helping there.
How many Jewish refugees are Israel expecting due to the war and the situation in Ukraine?
Within the first month of the war that started in late February, there were already 6,000 Jews that had made Aliyah from Ukraine. There were hundreds and hundreds starting to come from Russia. And at that time, there were already 7,000 waiting in Eastern Europe for their Aliyah flights. And the expectation, I think, will be at least 20,000 from Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. Russia and Belarus are also being impacted by the Western sanctions on them, the economic downturn. I think a lot of Russian Jews are saying it's time to come. There's around 800,000 Jews in Russia that are either Jewish or a close relative that qualify under the law of return. You have around 200,000 in Ukraine. A lot of these Ukrainian refugees they prefer to stay in Europe so that after the conflict's over, they can go back home. But a lot of them have said, enough of this, it's time to finally come home and join ourselves to Israel and our Jewish homeland.
What do you believe, David, regarding the future of the global Aliyah?
Yes. Well, the Lord promised to gather them from all the nations where he had scattered them, and that it was a two-phase process. You see this clearly in Ezekiel 36 and 37, in Jeremiah as well and all, but I think Ezekiel really states it very clearly that it's a physical return to the land and then a spiritual return to God. And we're almost at the threshold of half the Jews in the world living back in the land of Israel. It's around 45-46% in Israel now. Just a few 10 more thousands here, 100,000 or so, you'll be at the 50% threshold, which will be historic, the first time in actually 2,700 years that the majority of Jews have lived back in the land. That's quite amazing, and we're working towards that landmark, and hopefully we then start moving into that spiritual phase, which is already happening with all the believers in the land here, and this spiritual return to God, where God promised to give them a new heart, take out the heart of stone, give them a heart of flesh, pour his spirit out upon them. And that's truly the next phase that we look forward to.
Okay, David, thank you so much for taking this time with us. May God bless you. Tusen takk til alle dere som står sammen med oss i forbønn og i givertjeneste. I oppdraget Gud har gitt oss, trøst mitt folk. Uten dere hadde det ikke vært mulig å gjøre det vi sammen gjør i dag. Jeg har lyst til å invitere deg til 2 spesielle eventer som ligger foran oss. Lørdag 14. mai, det er jo bursdag for Israel i vår kalender. Da har vi folkemøte for Israel i Kuppelhallen i Stavanger fra klokken 12 til ca. 3:30. Dette blir en kjempeflott event hvor en av de fremste arabiske stemmene for Israel i dag, nemlig Josef Haddad, blir med oss. Det gjør også Hanania Naftali, som har bortimot millioner av følgere på sosiale medier. I tillegg så skal vi takke av den israelske ambassadøren Alon Roth, som er i ferd med å avslutte sin term her i Norge. Pluss mange andre og mye annet som skjer denne dagen. Så sett av lørdag 14. mai i Kuppelhallen, Stavanger. Du kan gå inn på nettsiden vår ikaj.no og lese mer. Det andre som jeg ønsker å invitere deg til, den andre eventen, det er vår sommerkonferanse, som går av stabelen fra 30. juni til 3. juli. Og vi har funnet et lokale like ved vårt kontor her i Åsgårdstrand, nemlig på Dal Gjestegård. Dette blir en festsamling for både store og små. Og det blir lovsang, fellesskap, undervisning, forkynnelse og morsomme, rike, gode aktiviteter for barna. Dette her ligger jo i et fantastisk område av Norge, og noen av Norges beste strender, har i hvert fall blitt kåret av noen, ligger bare noen få kilometer fra Dal Gjestegård. Gå også inn på ikaj.no og les mer om dette. Her må man melde seg på for å få bestilt måltider, og om du har med barn som skal være med på det som skjer under denne konferansen. Da sier vi takk for i dag, og Gud velsigne deg.